Welcome to Fields of Study from the Masonic Cancer Center. Today we sit down with Dr. Hai Dang Nguyen, Assistant Professor in the Department of Pharmacology and Masonic Cancer Center member. Hello and welcome to Fields of Study from the Masonic Cancer Center. My name is Max Huber. In this video series, we sit down with some of our researchers, doctors, nurses, staff members with the Masonic Cancer Center to get to know them a little bit better and see how COVID-19 and other current situations are affecting the work that we're doing. And I am pleased to be joined today by Dr. Hai Dang Nguyen. He is an assistant professor in the Department of Pharmacology with the University of Minnesota Medical School. Dr. Nguyen, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so kind of wanted to go on some of your past here. You got your undergraduate at the College of Worcester in Ohio, then did your PhD here at the University of Minnesota in Dr. Belinsky's lab before heading out to Harvard Medical School and Massachusetts General Hospital Cancer Center. What was the transition like for you, from your undergrad in Ohio to Minnesota, then out to Boston, and then obviously eventually back to here at in the great state of Minnesota?
I thought the transition from undergrad to graduate school was quite a jump, because I went from a small liberal arts college where, we only had about 1,800 students going to a really big campus. And so that was definitely something very different. But at the same time, it was very exciting because I get to have a lot more students, like student body within the university. University feel a lot more, almost like a big town for me, right? When I moved here to the city itself. And definitely also the science is a lot more vibrant just because of the more masses of, different colleges, different departments, and different laboratories and research that is going on here in Minnesota. I actually was doing undergraduate research in biochemistry in Ohio and at the College of Worcester for my thesis. And one of the professors that I actually used to read a lot of papers on was actually in the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. And so that's why I decided to kind of apply here for my PhD program, wanted to study bioorganic. And then turns out that I liked molecular biology a lot more. And so I moved over to do more molecular biology with Dr. Belinsky here at the university. So from there, I kind of, being in Minnesota was at the university, I had actually been exposed to a lot of more cancer biology, more disease relevant sort of things. And so I wanted to kind of learn more and apply more of my molecular biology and biochemistry skill sets in trying to understanding mechanisms and how do we actually develop therapy and trying to really translate basic science into more of the translational and bedside. So that's how my interest was when I was here doing my PhD. And that was also the reason as to why I moved out to Boston to Harvard Medical School and being exposed even a lot more at Massachusetts General Hospital in the Cancer Center. And really having that intersection between basic science and translational science and precision medicines really honed into my own skill sets, as well as exposed me to other types of research that are going on in the frontier of science and biomedical sciences. So to your last point as to why I decided to move back to Minnesota is I actually had really enjoyed my time here. So I was here doing my PhD for about 5.5 years. And I realized that when I was looking around for where I wanted to do my faculty positions, number one, I thought, Midwest actually have a very vibrant, very collaborative research. Minnesota is definitely kind of in the frontier here for the Midwest. And when I was interviewing back here, I actually realized that there was so much more momentum since I left. And there's so much more collaborative effort in really bringing different types of science, both engineering and biomedical science, and really trying to develop new therapeutic and translational medicine. So I found that was very exciting to be back. And with the position that I am in, which is in the functional genomics for solid tumor, was kind of the one of the efforts within the Masonic Cancer Center is really to bring different expertise from different clinicians, scientists, and all the way to basic science to really trying to figure out different tools and develop new tools, new assays, and in order to trying to bring different expertise together to develop new therapy and thinking about science and the way that we bring new medicines out in the future.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
and kind of talking about like that think hub that you mentioned, bringing all of these different uh, brain powers together. You are housed in the new Discovery Labs
correct.
with the Masonic Cancer Center, and there are, like you said, just some interesting research that is taking place there, from Dr. Olin to Dr. Chen, Dr. Lagasvati, yourself. That's got to be kind of a fun thing. You come back to the University of Minnesota and you immediately kind of get put in with this group, and it's really kind of a think tank on solving the problem of cancer.
Correct. And I think it's really interesting to also allowing myself to be exposed to other fields of research that is not really particularly where at my forefront at the moment, but is something to be able to think about. And there's a lot of more about transferring knowledge from one field of research to another field. There are certain challenges that we actually deal with in our own research that could be applicable to other research as well. So I think there's a lot of crosstalks that are going on within, like within our center. Being back also actually have the other advantage that I think a lot of new assistant professors may not actually thought about is that being able to reconnect with colleagues or professors that I actually used to study with. And I actually now have already know kind of their previous research, what were their previous expertise and what they have really transitioned on to do now. And having that already established knowledge, I was able to kind of ask people for help and really trying to look for new expertise and really to develop a stronger research program within our own lab and also within the center itself for the Discovery Center.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. You went from being not only the student of some of these researchers to now being their colleague and getting to work
Exactly.
alongside them. So
Yeah.
it's kind of unique. You will see that, but a lot of people, they go off into certain areas like you did into Boston, but able to come back. Now, do you said you studied in Dr. Belinsky's lab under your PhD. Do you ever collaborate with her since you've come back to the University of Minnesota?
We're actually thinking of actually gonna have a collaboration project in about a couple months here. We talked a little bit about it pre-COVID, and so with COVID, everything is kind of shut down a little bit. But I just got an award from the CTSI program to potentially maybe collaborate with Dr. Belinsky and Chad Myers, also over in the Big B program, which is a computational biology program, to really setting up to do some genome editing as well as some CRISPR screen to look for new synthetic lethality targets.
Cool.
Yeah. So we're kind of because I work now still very much on DNA damage response and DNA repair. So we're actually now joined back into our big joint lab meeting with Dr. Belinsky, Dr. Hendrickson, and other labs within the BMBB programs that are actually more on DNA damage and DNA repair and other types of DNA metabolism. And then now I'm kind of venture over to do RNA metabolism as well. So then now I have another group of a couple other people that were kind of like trying to find ways to intersect between DNA and RNA metabolism and proteins and everything. That's how science is going now. So that's why it's actually very exciting.
And you mentioned the buzzword COVID. Obviously, that has affected some of the work that not only yourself but all of us are doing. You move into this brand new discovery lab, get these awesome opportunities to collaborate with people, and then COVID hits. So it looks like you are back in your office. But how has this whole pandemic adjusted or changed the way that you've gone about your work here in the summer of 2020?
Yeah, so I think with COVID making new PI labs actually very difficult. Number one is that having new trainees coming in and having a little bit more limited and harder time to train people. So it just requires a lot more effort and planning to making sure that people are coming in with exactly what they need to do and do it in a way very swiftly and be able to get in and out. And not, so the training there takes a little bit longer to do. With that said, I think COVID definitely has some positive side in terms of science. I don't know if you realize, but scientific communities are actually a lot more united. Doesn't really matter on what field you are. So then you can actually now are able to connect with colleagues and other scientists in different fields because now they have webinars, seminars that usually are within certain institution, but now they actually are broadcast around the world. So then we get to kind of hear talks from people in Europe. I'm still connecting with colleagues in the East Coast that having talks over at Dana-Farber and things like that too. So a lot of these talks actually really keep me like scientifically going and really keeping me on top of where science is currently at, and everybody is still have the challenge. It's not just a single lab. I think everybody, big labs, established lab, have the same kind of challenge. But at the same time, I just felt that we are very much more connected now than it used to be when before like the whole COVID and shutting down things and making things now that having to be more online.
Yeah.
And so the connection is definitely much wider.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it's been nice,
Yeah. And
especially.
I was going to say, not even, you might not have the physical connection where you're talking to a colleague down the hall, but all of us have had to adapt. Like I probably in a few months ago would have sat down with you in your office and done this interview. Now we're doing this. I'm in my basement. You're at your office. So just the interconnectivity that it shows, we're a much larger scale than we even thought before.
Exactly.
People who thought that I can't work from home, I can't work in my basement, I can't
Yeah.
work out on my sun porch, are finding that you can and you've had to. So not only am I going to adjust, I need to adjust because research isn't stopping, cancer isn't stopping,
Exactly.
COVID's getting in the way, but we are not stopping.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I think during our shutdown, I was actually just stayed home. But even when I was home, I pretty much have every day, I have about 3 to 4 hours of seminars of different like cancer series from different institution and that sort of thing that actually keep me very busy
Yeah.
because with 4 hours a day, there's a lot of information to digest as well and to like process. But it's really interesting to be able to be in those sort of questionnaires, webinars, asking other scientists questions. I still attend now conferences. So I've been to like 1 or 2 conferences that are online. And then that way that you also be able to connect with new scientists, still reading poster papers, from conferences and everything like that. And the way that we ask questions now, instead of just one-on-one, we're now emailing each other. Twitter has become a big thing now in science where we actually just ask people questions on Twitter, and that sort of aspect. So yeah, it's in some ways, I think this would stay in some shape or form. I think this online sort of connection with other scientists around the world is here to stay, and I think it will help us as scientists as well as for trainees to be able to be a lot more exposed to science in other, other part of the country and other part of the world. So then in some ways, that's the positive side about it.
Yeah.
Um, Negative side is definitely there. I think funding is definitely going to be a challenge. Yeah, as I don't know you've seen, but funding for a lot of the agencies, a lot of the nonprofit organization is relatively on the cutting down side as
Yeah.
well, because I think everybody is going to be holding down on their budget a lot more carefully within this fiscal year. It's just because of so much uncertainties is there. So I think for startup new labs, not just myself, but I start to feel that other colleagues within the universities or at other universities, I think we're going to feel the same sort of problem, is that we have limited um, capacity and the limited research time and resources, and to generate sufficient amount of data to be able to put new grants out. And so that's going to be a challenge. I think is the challenge for any labs. But I think for new labs, that's really the case. With that said too, is that the positive side about it is that within the Masonic Cancer Center, and as well as other labs around the discovery labs, or in general within the University of Minnesota itself, is that I really like the scientific environment and how collaborative everyone is. And so in some ways, I think the consensus from colleagues that I have talked to is that, yes, this is a tough time for all junior faculties, not just the first years, but anyone that actually haven't really had tenure yet, or haven't really got a big R01 grant yet. But at the same time, we're all starting to pull together and really think of alternatives, figure out collaboration work that can make our grant stronger, and figure out new ways to do things more effectively and more collaborative. So with that said, I'm kind of hesitant to say that this is really all negative. There's definitely negative aspect about it, but there's also still a lot of positive things. And I think the momentum is still there, even though that we don't really see each other a lot more. Right now, it's just all Zoom meetings all the time.
Oh
So
yeah.
instead of all
A
Zoom meetings,
little Zoom fatigue, I think, for everyone. But you've kind of
yes,
touched on, and I always like to end the interviews this way, and you kind of touched on it a little bit because you talked about, there are negatives to obviously what we're seeing, but there are some very strong and substantial positives that we've seen through this, whether it's the way that we've adapted, whether
yeah,
it's knowing that collaboration and working on papers, it's not just going to be, you're not just going to see names from Minnesota on a paper. It can be people from all over the world, because we have found ways to work together and really make this a smaller world than we thought it was once before. But I always like to end like this, and it's a very loaded question, and you can take it from a personal stance, a professional stance, however you want to. But with everything that's going on with COVID, civil unrest, working from home, not knowing what the fall semester, spring semester might look like for an assistant professor, at this current stage, what gives you hope moving forward?
current state, what gives me hope? I think at the current state, what gives me hope is that I think I have some trainees in the lab now. They are still as motivated to do research and still learn. I have undergrads that are from summer research programs that they cannot come to the lab, but they're still doing designing experiment, learning how to critically think about scientific questions. And having the trainees in the lab is really satisfying and very gratifying. And I started to find that is the one of the most gratifying thing being a faculty. And their drive is really what driven me to continue to do science. And they are like, my trainees are very on top of their research. We always check in with each other just to make sure that mentally everyone is coping,
Yeah.
correctly, just because I think as students, there's a lot of pressure with classes as well. But I think the motivation that they wanted to learn and do science is really what keep us in our position to do, because we're still in the position of doing research and training new trainees for the next tier of researchers, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I definitely see we don't really know what the outcome of the university shutting down or not, but I think we still have, Zoom lab meetings. We still discuss papers, going through new papers that are coming out. A lot of people are at home, so everybody's writing new reviews. New papers are still constantly being published. So just to catching up on data, catching up on new directions and way of thinking and way of doing scientific discoveries is very different. But at the same time, I think for students and for myself, it's a good skills to learn as well. Not just on teaching, all the lab research side of things, but really to figure out, develop new ways to actually teach students on how to be more proactive and to be more present online, because social media is also here to stay.
Yeah.
And I think science is moving a lot more to social media. And so how to navigate more online system, more online tools to do research and to manage your project workflow is also very important for research. So I think on that positive note, I think it's very hopeful that, and we're still kind of coping with the whole situation. We don't know that, if Minnesota COVID number is going to go up. As you know, medical school might shut down again. So we're still kind of tiptoeing on the research slowly. But at the same time, we are having to learn to adapt and finding new skills to actually adapt to this situation. And as scientists, that's what we're best at, to adapt with new situations,
Yeah.
or to create new situations.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything you mentioned, that is kind of the definition of hope for right now. So thank you so much, Dr. Nguyen, for joining me. It was my pleasure. And I hope that I can see you soon in person, take a tour of the lab, and just enjoy a cup of coffee with the entire team down there.
Yeah, definitely. Whenever you're here and when we can actually meet again, the lab is up and running. So I'm excited. I'm actually already felt like I don't need it. I am not needed in the lab anymore. That the trainees can do their own things. So in some ways, it's feeling a little bit more settled.
Yeah.
So yeah, come on by and I'll show you how the lab runs.
And then anyone, I mean, they are located, if you're in the Moose Tower building, they're located right behind the Caribou Coffee. So I'm being serious. Grab a cup of coffee, go take a tour of it. Don't get too far in there.
Yes.
There's some amazing research going on. But thank you all for joining us, and we'll check you out next time on our next edition of Fields of Study from the Masonic Cancer Center.
All right. Thank you. Bye.